अगर आपने अभी तक हमारा चैनल सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया तो अभी सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकॉन को क्लिक करके हमारी लेटेस्ट वीडियोस के बारे में अपडेट जानें। सब्सक्राइब कीजिए।
We have leaders who, without any remorse, continue to defend Osama bin Laden as a martyr. Support and strengthen FATF. Believe that terrorism in one part of the world is a threat to peace and security of the entire world. And therefore, while condemning these attacks, our response should be unified and unequivocal. The threat of terrorism in our neighborhood. These security fears have been further exacerbated by the changed political situation in Afghanistan. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to join others in thanking Under Secretary General Voronko and seated Acting Executive Director Chen for their briefings on the 14th report of the Secretary General on the threat posed by ISIL-Daesh to the international peace and security. At the outset, I express my heartfelt condolences to all the families of victims who lost their loved ones in recent terror attacks in Afghanistan, United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Syria, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Uganda. As a country that has long borne the brunt of cross-border terrorism, including the 2008 Mumbai terror attack and the 2016 Pathankot terror attack, with victims of both these dastardly acts yet to get justice, India is acutely aware of the human cost of terrorism and remains fully committed to bringing the perpetrators of these attacks to justice. We reiterate our firm belief that terrorism in one part of the world is a threat to peace and security of the entire world. And therefore, while condemning these attacks, our response should be unified and unequivocal. We should not forget the fact that even after 20 years of September 11 attacks, we have leaders who, without any remorse, continue to defend Osama bin Laden as a martyr. Mr. President, the current report of Secretary General raises serious concerns of ISIL's continued attempts to revive itself in its core zone, as well as expanding and strengthening its affiliates in several countries of Asia and Africa. This is a matter of grave concern. We have been highlighting consistently the threat of terrorism in our neighborhood. These security fears have been further exacerbated by the changed political situation in Afghanistan. The report of the monitoring team is concerning as it highlights that Afghanistan has the potential to become a safe haven for Al-Qaeda and a number of terrorist groups. The SG's report also highlights near doubling of strength of ISIL Khorasan following the Taliban's release of several thousand individuals from prison. In his 12th report, Secretary General has highlighted that Shahab al-Mujahir, the leader of the ISIL-K, as having maintained familial ties to the prescribed Haqqani network as well. The report of the Taliban Sanctions Committee recognizes the continuation of the links between Taliban, especially through the Haqqani network, and Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups in our neighborhood. It is essential that we do not lose sight of the ease with which the prescribed Haqqani network, with support from their patron state, have worked along with prominent terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, ISIL-K, etc. in South Asia. We have been reiterating the close links between prescribed terrorist entities under the 1267 sanctions regime, such as Lashkar-e-Taiba and other terrorist groups, including Jaish-e-Mohammed. However, in spite of repeatedly flagging these concerns, the Secretary General's report has failed to take notice of these linkages. We hope that in future iterations of such report, inputs from all member states would be treated on an equal footing and an evidence-based and credible yardstick be applied by its authors. Mr. President, the sign of re-emergence of ISIL-Daesh in Syria and in Iraq calls for urgent action by the international community. We reiterate that terrorists can neither be defeated by forming alliances with non-sovereign entities, nor while pursuing national political agendas. We need to support regional member states in their implementation of their measures against terrorists and UN-designated terrorist groups. In Africa, it is becoming increasingly evident that terrorist groups with linkages to ISIL and Al-Qaeda are gaining in strength. They have targeted and killed civilians, especially women and children, security forces, and UN peacekeepers. It is heartening to note that countries affected by these terrorist groups are taking measures both on their own and collectively to counter the threat. We commend all these efforts, including that of SADC in Mozambique, Multinational Joint Task Force in the Lake Chad Basin, and the G5 Sahel Force in the 5 Sahel countries. These efforts should be supported by the international community and the UN without any caveats. Mr. President, today the terrorists' use of ICT, social media, emerging technologies such as new digital payment methods, encrypted messaging services, cryptocurrencies, crowdfunding platforms, unmanned aircraft systems, etc., pose a dynamic threat for which most of the member states do not have adequate response capabilities. Global expert bodies such as the Financial Action Task Force have been raising serious concern about terrorist financing. We have recently witnessed terror attacks through drones in our neighborhood and now in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, which have been condemned strongly by the Security Council. The recent Council Resolution 2617 takes note of this threat posed by unmanned aircraft systems. We need to work together to develop appropriate solutions and evolve global standards to address these threats. Terrorism impacts everyone irrespective of the place or origin. Unfortunately, it took us decades and then September 11 attacks to come out of a flawed mindset of treating terrorism based on motivations behind terror attacks. Here, I would like to mention that the Security Council Resolution 1566 of 2004 notes that terrorist acts are under no circumstances justifiable by considerations of a political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnic, religious, or other similar nature. Resolution 1566 further underlines that terrorism seriously impairs the enjoyment of human rights and threatens social and economic development of all states. It is essential that we keep this in mind as we look to further strengthen our counter-terror architecture. Mr. President, in conclusion, I'd like to reiterate India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar's 8-point action plan in this council. 1. Summon the political will. Don't justify terrorism. Don't glorify terrorists. 2. No double standards. Terrorists are terrorists. No good or bad distinction to be made. 3. Don't place blocks and holds on listing requests without reason. 4. Discourage exclusivist thinking against false priorities. 5. Enlist and delist objectively, not on political or religious considerations. 6. Recognize the linkage to organized crime. 7. Support and strengthen FATF. 8. Provide greater funding to UN counter-terrorism. As chair of Counter-Terrorism Committee, India will work closely with UNOCT and CTED and continue to take up this issue with all stakeholders so that a zero-tolerance approach to terrorism and its perpetrators becomes the norm of the international counter-terrorism discourse.